Tonight, US troops killed in a drone strike in Jordan. The president vows to respond. Also tonight, as rate hikes bite, are there other ways to tackle inflation? A Tasmanian Aboriginal hut burnt to the ground. And Sinner celebrations, a 5-set stunner earns the Italian a maiden Grand Slam victory. Good evening, Guy Stayner with ABC News. Fears of a wider regional war in the Middle East have escalated after 3 US troops were killed by Iran-backed militants in Jordan. It's the first time US military personnel have been killed by hostile fire since the Israel-Hamas war erupted. President Joe Biden has vowed to respond, but he's facing intensifying pressure to directly confront Iran, which has denied any involvement in the drone strike.
From the bridge of a British warship, an attack drone fired by Iran-backed Houthis is shot down over the Red Sea. American military bases have also come under fire in Syria, Iraq and now Jordan. This latest strike killing at least 3 US soldiers.
We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases, and we shall respond.
The drone strike hit this US military outpost in Jordan, known as Tower 22, as troops were sleeping. At least 30 others were injured. It's in a strategically important location, at the most northeastern point where Jordan's borders meet Syria and Iraq. A group of Iran-backed factions known as the Islamic Resistance in Iraq has claimed responsibility for previous attacks in the region.
This is the tipping point. So 3 US soldiers' deaths is important. The US will have to respond even more strongly than it's done to previous attacks. And that will present dilemmas for both Baghdad and Tehran to respond in turn.
Threatening to put a match to a Middle East tinderbox, juggling multiple crises. Iran-backed Houthi militia have been boarding and seizing international ships for months in the Red Sea. Now they're hitting them with drones and missiles. Retaliatory British and US airstrikes in Yemen doing little to deter the militants. After the first deaths of American troops, fears are growing over the risk of a wider war. John Lyons, ABC News, Jerusalem.
They were murders that shocked the nation. Now, after a quarter of a century, one of the 4 men convicted for his part in Australia's worst serial killings, the Snowtown murders, appears set to be granted freedom within months. Victim families, still haunted by the horrific crimes, strongly oppose Mark Hayden's release. James Wakelin has this exclusive Stateline investigation.
These are the faces of the victims of the so-called Snowtown murders. For every face, there are families that will never fully recover from what was done to their loved ones in one of Australia's most notorious serial killings.
They've suffered and continue to suffer unimaginable trauma.
Now, almost 25 years after his arrest, one of the perpetrators is set to be freed. Mark Hayden, whose wife Elizabeth was one of the victims, will complete his 25-year sentence in May.
The court has imposed a sentence. Once that sentence is complete, then he would be released from custody.
While his fellow accused, Robert Wagner, John Bunting and James Vlasakis, were convicted of murder, Hayden, who is now 65, was only found to have assisted the offenders, not to have been actively involved in the killings.
It's a very universal view. They would prefer he was never to be released.
The horrific crimes were uncovered by detectives who found decomposing bodies in a bank in Snowtown, 150 kilometres north of Adelaide, in May 1999. In total, 11 people were murdered over a 7-year period. Hayden was given a non-parole period of 18 years and he's applied twice to be released, and it remains possible that he could be paroled even before he served his full sentence.
His institutional behaviour has been very good. He's been easily managed. He hasn't presented problems.
The South Australian Government is now considering its legal options.
And if it's possible, impose whatever conditions that the court deems fit on Mark Hayden.
James Vlasakis, who was convicted over 4 of the murders, can apply to be released next year, but the main offenders, Bunting and Wagner, have been told they will never be released on parole. James Wakelin, ABC News.
New details are emerging of how scouts unwittingly became caught up in an investigation into neo-Nazis. Masked extremists were spotted at a scout hall in Sydney over the long weekend. The scouts say they handed over the keys for what they were told would be a family-friendly birthday party. Meanwhile, police say they've now identified the group's members, and some of them came from Tasmania.
They were confronting scenes on Australia Day, a pack of neo-Nazis, many hiding behind masks. Off camera, on the train network, police ordered them to remove their disguises.
This is the first time that these neo-Nazis have ever been identified. The police know exactly who they are.
Some are already well known to authorities, like leader Thomas Sewell, who has criminal convictions in Victoria. The government says while 27 of those stopped were from New South Wales, 24 were from Victoria, 6 came from South Australia, 5 were Queenslanders and 4 travelled from Tasmania. On Saturday, some of the extremists were spotted at this scout hall on the city's North Shore. A Scouts representative says a couple with a child picked up the keys and that the online booking form promised a combined casual 30th birthday party and belated Australia Day weekend get-together with friends. Many will have young children. It will be a family-friendly event. The state government is threatening to name and shame members of the group, but some experts think that could backfire.
For people around the fringes of the movement that may just be beginning to get involved, potentially unmasking them might be counterproductive because it starts then to block their options for leaving these movements behind.
So what more can be done to try to stop these kinds of groups airing their views in public? New South Wales has already banned the display of Nazi symbols like the swastika, but whether that extends to Nazi salutes is yet to be tested in the courts.
I want to make it clear that if that legal barrier isn't cleared, we will move legislation to outlaw racist Nazi ideology.
If there are technical reasons to tweak the law, then we'd certainly be interested in cooperating.
There's no place for these kinds of grubs in a civilised society.
Clamping down on an ever-moving target. Nick Dole, ABC News, Sydney.
Tasmania Police is investigating a suspicious fire that destroyed an Aboriginal hut in the state's southeast over the weekend. A video posted to social media in the early hours of Sunday morning appears to show an Aboriginal-built bark hut in Cygnet lit up in flames, accompanied by a threatening message. The hut was built outside the South East Tasmanian Aboriginal Corporation's office by Aboriginal families about 5 years ago. It was created to teach Aboriginal children about their culture. The incident coincides with Australia Day weekend celebrations.
They've burnt down our school for our kids, and I think that's what really hurts me the most. The kids that use it and the kids that want to know about it and how to build it and how to use it, and that's what probably is the worst.
The RBA will be announcing a decision on whether to lift interest rates again in just over a week. It's the bank's method of bringing down inflation, which means the third of Australians who have a mortgage have been doing the heavy lifting when it comes to cooling the economy. It's led many Australians to ask questions about how fair the current system is and whether alternative methods like increasing superannuation contributions would be fairer.
Daniel Wigg and his partner bought their home last year, days before the first interest rate rise. They're now paying an extra $1,700 a month on their mortgage.
It's a huge difference, and that's a big hole of, money that we don't really have.
The 50-year-old is now working 3 nights a week at a bar on top of his full-time job to make ends meet.
Very fatigued. And I'm not getting any younger, so that's not getting any easier.
Daniel is one of the 37% of Australians with a mortgage. As interest rates on mortgages and business loans rise, in theory, consumer spending goes down, which makes it harder for businesses to put prices up, which brings down inflation.
If we're supposed to carry the burden of this inflation, It should just be more equally distributed.
In the 1950s and 60s, increasing income tax was used to deal with higher inflation.
No government would do that these days. Under current arrangements, it's much more easy for politicians to say to people who are complaining about higher interest rates, oh, that's the decision of the Independent Reserve Bank. It's got nothing to do with us.
It's been suggested using superannuation contribution increases to bring down inflation would impact a broader spread of the population and benefit individuals rather than the banks. But there are some practical problems.
It would require legislation, which wouldn't necessarily get through the Parliament. And that means that it would be a much slower response to rising inflation than changing interest rates, which can be done more or less overnight.
And the evidence shows, however painful, raising interest rates works to bring down inflation, meaning for now, mortgage holders like Daniel will have to continue to put in the extra hours to keep the economy in check. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
The battle to dominate Australia's clean energy transition is being fought by billionaires backing electrification or hydrogen. But many hydrogen projects are under pressure and the price of EV batteries has plunged. In car manufacturing, Toyota is betting big on hydrogen, which critics say isn't paying off.
We're looking out for signs of crime with security guard and company owner Grant Burton.
So doing a general patrol today, just checking our fence line, looking...
His vehicle emits zero emissions and it's not an EV. Instead, it's powered by hydrogen.
If we have to plug in and go down the lines of recharging a car, we're looking at 8 hours off the road.
Welcome back.
Grant staff take their vehicles down to this refuelling station owned by Japanese car maker Toyota.
So obviously today you're only doing a half a refuel, so maybe won't be 5 minutes.
The hydrogen comes out as a sub-zero gas that's made here on site using solar as well as power from the grid and water. Just like an EV, there is no tailpipe on this car. Toyota says that all that's emitted is water vapour, which comes out somewhere under here and apparently is so clean you could water the garden with it. But finding a station is difficult.
The refuelling infrastructure is limited. It's growing, but it's limited.
Just 6 hydrogen cars were sold in Australia last year compared to 87,000 EVs. Energy economists say that even in Japan, where the government is pushing hydrogen, these cars aren't taking off.
The companies that made a big bet on hydrogen vehicles, I think, are a little bit reluctant to let go of the sunk cost.
She says filling up one of these cars will never be as cheap as charging an EV.
You need to be able to make electricity to make the hydrogen really, really, really cheap. And the thing is that when electricity gets really cheap, it becomes even cheaper to run your electric car.
Which could mean that hydrogen cars remain in the slow lane. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
Coming up on 7:30, Sarah Ferguson returns for 2024 and is joined by US Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders.
What's at stake for America if Donald Trump wins the presidency?
Everything is at stake. There are struggles about whether or not nations will remain democratic or move toward oligarchy, move toward autocracy. And certainly if the United States moves in an authoritarian way, it will certainly send a signal to every country on earth that that's the future of politics in this world.
Jehovah's Witnesses committed to mandatory reporting of child sex abuse to police during the Royal Commission. But the church is still dealing with historical abuse cases behind closed doors. It's prompted one survivor to call for change. And a warning, this story contains content that may be confronting for some viewers.
Kezia Witten fears the Jehovah's Witnesses are still hiding child sexual abuse.
You're a survivor every day you survive.
The 34-year-old from regional Western Australia grew up in the Jehovah's Witnesses faith, which believes Armageddon is imminent. But there was a far greater threat inside her family home. About 3 decades ago, aged just 5, Kezia Witten was sexually abused by her brother, Joel Witten, who was over 18 at the time.
He should have been hurting for me, not hurting me. Nothing like that should ever happen to a child, ever.
It left her with deep emotional scars and trauma.
I was pretty committed to killing myself.
Kezia confronted Joel later in life, and he confessed to the Jehovah's Witnesses elders in 2018, following the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse. But the elders chose to conduct their own investigation and not report the matter to police. This was despite the faith group committing to report child sexual abuse during the inquiry. Kezia then decided to report the matter to police herself after having a child of her own, and Joel pleaded guilty and was jailed late last year. The Jehovah's Witnesses didn't respond to all questions, they say, to protect the privacy of those involved, but say they regard child abuse as a crime and abhorrent sin. WA's mandatory reporting laws don't require religious organisations to report historical abuse which occurred before 2022, even if the survivor is still currently a child. It's something survivors like Kezia Witten want changed, but the state government says the laws were not intended to address historical abuse. With her abuser now jailed, Kezia has started making candles to help her find the light in her life.
I think it's knowing that you're a lot more than what hurt you, instead of letting it consume you completely.
She says other survivors shouldn't give up hope. Brianna Fiore, ABC News.
And if you or someone you know needs help, contact Beyond Blue by phone or their website, or Lifeline on 13 11 14. A jury has heard a graphic account of an alleged sexual assault by the Wallabies star Kurtley Beale against a woman at a pub in Sydney. She's told a court she was shocked and surprised by his alleged actions in front of her fiancé, but the jurors are being urged to keep an open mind.
Kurtley Beale spent today in the same courtroom as his accuser. It was December 2022 when the Wallaby was at Bondi's Beach Road Hotel at the same time as the woman, who can't be identified. She told the trial she'd been drinking at a lunch and a friend's house before meeting up with her fiancé at the pub. There, she spoke to Mr. Beale for the first time, making conversation about his wedding pictures that she'd seen on Instagram. Later, with her fiancé close by, she alleged she felt a hand grab her buttocks. The next thing I'm aware of is feeling shocked and surprised, and I turn and realise it's Mr. Beale. She told the court she said stop. At another point, she was heading to the men's toilets to avoid queues in the women's. She said she heard someone say oi and saw Mr. Beale with an unidentified man. He says, "I really want to you." He just kept repeating. I kept saying, "We can't. You're married. I'm engaged. I don't want to." The woman said she went to the toilet, leaving the cubicle door ajar, and Kurtley Beale came in, locking it. The woman said he asked her for oral sex. I said no, no. I had to say no over and over again. She alleges she was sexually assaulted. The woman told the jury she left the toilets and returned to her fiancé. She told him Mr. Beale had tried to kiss her. Today, she testified that she didn't explain what allegedly happened because she was worried about causing a scene. Mr. Beale has pleaded not guilty to 1 count of sexual intercourse without consent and 2 of sexual touching. His lawyers say everything that happened in the toilet was consensual. Jamie McKinnell, ABC News, Sydney.
The world's most indebted developer, Chinese property giant Evergrande, has been ordered into liquidation, owing nearly $500 billion to creditors. The order is likely to send ripples through China's crumbling financial markets as policymakers scramble to contain a deepening crisis.
Evergrande, once China's biggest real estate firm, overbuilt and overpromised. Developers powered the real estate boom that boosted the Chinese economy. But now it threatens to stall the country's economic recovery.
A winding up order has been issued.
All of their assets have been suspended.
Evergrande was believed to be a strong investment for middle-class families, hoping property was a safe place to keep their money. But it was not safe. Property prices fell and Evergrande came under pressure as the Chinese government cracked down on the enormous amount of borrowing in the property sector. A huge number of apartments remained vacant. These 14 buildings in southern China, constructed by Evergrande, were never completed.
The worry is hundreds of thousands of Chinese families
not getting the flat they thought they were going to live in.
Evergrande first defaulted in 2021. It gained the notorious title of most indebted property developer in the world, owing to mind-blowing debts of around $500 billion, sending shockwaves through global financial markets.
It tried to seek a new debt restructuring plan with creditors, 2 years in limbo until today. A Hong Kong court has ordered the company be wound up, the judge declaring it was time to say enough is enough.
If you were holding on to one of these big property companies thinking that the government somehow was going to step in and underwrite issues, the reality is they're not.
Evergrande can appeal this order, a move that would drag out an already long and complicated process. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News.
The local share market's winning streak continued today with the 6th straight rise. Here's Alan Kohler.
Woolworths shares went backwards a tiny amount while Coles went up after Woolworths said that things are really tough in New Zealand at the moment, so it's writing down the value of its Kiwi business by $1.5 billion and also booking a loss of $200 million on the value of Dan Murphy's. But these are book entries, not actual cash, so investors weren't too bothered. Apart from that, banks went up, miners went down, and the All Ordinaries had its 6th consecutive rise. Oh, and the Australian green cement technology business, Calix, acquired some cement shoes after reporting that it has to relocate a low-carbon cement project in Germany from Hanover to somewhere else. They're not sure where yet. The Shanghai stock market was untroubled by the liquidation of the Evergrande Group, which was well anticipated. It has collapsed, owing more than $500 billion, so its debts are larger than the market value of the entire Australian banking system. The debts are obvious and the creditors numerous, but the liquidators might have some trouble finding and seizing the assets. On commodity markets, oil and iron ore went up, copper and gold went down, and the Australian dollar edged a little higher, still under 66 US cents. Now, the nation's economists are starting to produce their reports on last week's Stage 3 tax announcement. Here's a chart from CBA showing the tax-to-income ratio overall for the whole country. Huge rise from bracket creep since 2008. Bit of a fall in 2018 with stages 1 and 2 of the Morrison government reforms, and then another big rise and a bit of a fall from stage 3, Mark 2. Net change overall lately, not much. And that's finance.
2 climate activists have been arrested for throwing soup at the Mona Lisa in Paris. A crowd looked on in surprise as 2 women crossed a security barrier and hurled food at the famous artwork. They yelled slogans advocating for a sustainable food system before being arrested. Bulletproof glass protects the Leonardo da Vinci painting. It wasn't damaged. Newly crowned Australian Open men's champion Yannick Sinner is still absorbing his maiden Grand Slam win after a sleepless night of celebrations. Sinner last night came from 2 sets down to beat Daniil Medvedev in 5 thrilling sets. In doing so, the 22-year-old became the first Italian man to win at Melbourne Park in a result that signals a new era in men's tennis.
Bleary-eyed but calm and content, Yannick Sinner held a Grand Slam trophy for the first time, just hours after the most significant milestone of his young career.
I didn't sleep much, but it's, great emotions, slowly realizing what I've done. It's a great achievement for me and my team.
Sinner seals the deal with an epic comeback.
Victory in the most unlikely of circumstances. An early finish appeared certain when Daniil Medvedev controlled the opening 2 sets.
And Medvedev taking charge of this final.
But a steely Sinner showed composure beyond his years.
And he's got it. He's back in this match. What an effort.
He won the next 2 sets, and as fatigue set in for the Russian, Sinner seized the moment, bringing the crowd to their feet, including superfans the Carota boys. Sinner's maiden major is another step for the next generation in men's tennis, although the 22-year-old is not thinking about Novak Djokovic's record just yet.
I'm just happy that I have this trophy for this year, and then we see what's coming.
For Medvedev, it was 3rd time unlucky in Australia.
I wanted to win. I was close. Was I really close or not? Tough to say, but was not far.
After another tournament featuring late-night finishes, organisers are searching for ways to shorten matches. they've proposed to eliminate lets.
The extra time that it took over these 2 weeks of the event was over 15 hours. So it's significant.
Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne.
The Socceroos have set up a quarter-final clash at the Asian Cup against either Saudi Arabia or South Korea after they defeated Indonesia 4-0 in the round of 16. Australia again struggled early in attack and went ahead from a deflected strike from Jackson Irvine. That lead was doubled before half-time when Martin Boyle got on the end of an excellent cross. Late goals from Craig Goodwin and defender Harry Suter added some gloss to the Socceroos' win ahead of what will be a tough quarter-final.
We've got 4 days break now, and we'll go and watch their game in the next couple of days. And as I said, I truly believe that this result will build the belief even more in the group.
It's a story that sounds like fiction. A group of friends start a local football team in England and rise to incredible heights. But as Elias Kluwer reports, the Dorking Wanderers are showing the world how it's done.
30 kilometres from the centre of London, a football fairy tale in the making.
£5 a goal from now, paid Saturday. Oh, yes!
This is Mark White and his unlikely, rough-around-the-edges success story, the Dorking Wanderers.
Me and my mates, we were going to Premier League football and we got a bit bored of it and we just thought we'd start playing, have a fun side on a Saturday. It was just a social thing. We was in basically the equivalent of like Division 17.
The affable Londoner working a 9-to-5 job started what's known as a park team, social football anyone can play. Dorking kept winning, being promoted to higher and higher leagues, right up to the semi-professional National Conference League.
We've had 12 promotions, we've done really well. I've learned an awful lot as I've gone along.
Despite having no experience in coaching, Mark's colourful management style has not only been successful, it's earned him a worldwide following. Dorking's behind-the-scenes TikTok has over 17 million likes.
You must be bored. You must be bored. Whatever, mate. Not been a school or something.
As Dorking grows into a formidable football force, Mark continues to own, run and coach the club. So Dorking's gone from playing on a park to a relatively impressive field, but its next step will be its biggest one yet, to the EFL, which is home to the biggest and richest clubs in England.
We just want to keep driving forward and embracing people on our journey, you know?
The Wanderers are daring to dream of one day reaching the Premier League. Elias Kluwer, ABC News, Dorking.
To the weather, and last night's sunset was something of a sensation amongst our Hobart viewers and photographers. We had a record 70 photos sent to our email account. Far too many great shots to choose just one. These clouds sent shutters clicking all along the Derwent. Swansea hit 30 degrees today, Hobart had 29, Launceston and Burnie 24. It was cooler about the west, Strawn 19. Mount Reid had 17 millimetres of rain yesterday and another 8 today. Strawn had 7, Smithton 2. The satellite image shows a weak trough crossing Tasmania this afternoon. Tomorrow a ridge of high pressure will form over the state, putting us into a westerly airstream. It will be windier about the south. Across the country tomorrow, very heavy falls possible in southeast Queensland. Storms also in Darwin, a shower or two for Sydney and Canberra, and fine in the other capitals. Back home, it will be mainly fine at first, with showers increasing about the west tomorrow night. There's a medium chance of a late shower in the west, only about 1 millimetre, 20 degrees in Queenstown and Strawn. Staying fine in the northwest, Burnie 23, Devonport 22, 26 degrees in Launceston. Looks like a perfect day along the east coast, 25 in St Helens, Swansea and Oatlands 26. And Hobart's heading for a sunny top of 25 degrees after a low of 10. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 7 minutes past 6. On coastal waters, there'll be variable winds of 10 to 20 knots that will be more westerly about the south and reach up to 30 knots late in the day. There are strong wind warnings from Tasman Island to Low Rocky Point. Wednesday, there'll be showers about the west and far south, easing in the afternoon. Thursday will be windy, with showers about the west extending over the south in the afternoon. Friday will also be windy, but the weekend should be mostly fine and warm. And that is it for this evening's program. Up next, Sarah Ferguson's back with 7:30. See you tomorrow.